Welcome, Marquee Search. Really excited for this episode of Marquee Matchup. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome a terrific guy, a good friend, and really a top sports professional, Jarrod Dillon. Welcome, Jarrod.
Jeff, thanks for having me. Good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you again as well. Happy Father's Day. We just celebrated Father's Day. We're both girl dads of 3 daughters.
Yep.
How are you and Monica kind of keeping the girls busy or entertained after 100 days?
Well, it's fun. You and I have talked about this a little bit before too. And, I think, working in sports and entertainment and all the fun and limelight and different things that come along with that, it's easy to get caught up in your work and how competitive it is. But at the end of the day, single most important job that we have is being dads, being great dads. And, I take a lot of personal pride in that, trying to we always joke, my wife and I, it's about raising good human beings. I think as we look around what's going on in the world and specifically our country, we need more of those. So we're trying to do our part. And, I've been blessed to work with a lot of great people, mentors that I have seen be able to be great sports executives as well as great parents, fathers and mothers in this industry. And so I've been able to learn firsthand that you can do both. There's I think sometimes, unfortunately, people think you have to pick between career and family, especially in an industry like ours, where you have so much time away from home. But, a good friend of mine, Jeremy Walls at the Miami Dolphins, we worked together at the San Diego Padres, and he always challenged me, and we challenged each other that, it's okay to be great at both. You can be great at both. But it starts with having, people you work with and mentors that believe in that same philosophy so that you can feel like you have those freedoms. Just trying to do our part. The last few months have been crazy for everybody listening, obviously, and started out with the homeschooling, and God bless my wife, Monica, for being able to handle the majority of that. And I try to help out as much as I can, but she definitely deserves all the credit. And it's great. I can't remember the last time I had 3 or 4 consecutive nights home for dinner with my kids. Right. And now I've had over 3 months of it. So they're probably a little sick of me, dad being around all the time, but I'm definitely enjoying it. And that's definitely one of the silver linings of this whole pandemic that we're going through.
Well, for a little context, I'm just going to go through a quick intro and provide your background for everybody if they don't already know. And then we'll jump into some good questions here. So you're from my side of the country. You graduated from U of O 20 years ago, where you played 4 years of varsity football. You're tight end, weren't you?
I was, yeah. Well, technically an H-back because I wasn't big enough to play inline tight end. So, but yeah, we practice tight ends and H-backs all practice together. So you can lump me in with those guys.
Got it. Okay, good. So you earned your MBA after that at Sonoma State University. First notable experience was with the San Francisco Giants, spending 4 years there, leaving as the manager of special events. Then you followed Rob Sullivan to the Oakland Raiders, where you spent 3.5 years when the team took ticket sales in-house from the Oakland Football Marketing Association. Could probably do a podcast on that.
Yeah.
You served there as the director of premium and ticket sales. Next, you moved on to the San Diego Padres as their VP of ticket sales for 3 years before moving over to the VP of corporate partnerships for another 2 at the Pods. Then it's the story of a West Coast native who'd spent his entire career in California, who was recruited to the East Coast to become the EVP sales and marketing for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the early 2015. To be fair, you had other opportunities to go east that I know well about. The organization has grown to include other things outside of the Lightning, and 3 years ago, you became the Chief Marketing and Revenue Officer for Tampa Bay Sports and Entertainment, and now Vinik Sports Group. So if we can ask about the organization. So, the organization you joined was the Lightning, becomes Tampa Bay, this evolution to Tampa Bay Sports and Entertainment, and then to Vinik Sports Group. What all are you guys involved in?
Well, what I was reminded of as you went through that, my bio is just how long I've been doing this. And, I think above all else, I've been really, really blessed, as I said previously, just to be able to work with some really great mentors. And, one of the things, Jeff, and you and I have talked about and known each other a long time. I think I first met you back in roughly 2002, 3, somewhere in that range when I was at the San Francisco Giants. Mm-hmm. And, everywhere I've gone, it's really, if I look at it, most of the decision has been driven by people, whether that's going with someone that I know and value working for, or being inspired by somebody new that I wanted to go learn from. And that's kind of been a guiding light for me, kind of a North Star in my career, and definitely something I always throw out there for advice when talking with people in our industry. And it's not necessarily chasing a title or compensation or geography even, as much as it is, where do you have an opportunity to go work for great people, for people that are going to invest and believe in you? And where do you have a chance to go somewhere where you can actually create change, and have an opportunity to raise the bar? So, those are kind of some of the things that have steered me through my career, the various stops that you mentioned. But it's been a blessing. Here in Tampa, this was a huge move for my family. My wife, Monica, and I are both from the San Francisco Bay Area. We both went to the University of Oregon undergrad. We both were living in San Francisco for several years when we met. We moved to San Diego in 2009, I want to say, when Tom Garfinkel hired me down there. And we got married. Let's say I moved towards the end of August. We got married mid-September. And then Monica joined me in early October. So you talk about major life changes. We had marriage, new job, new city, 3 of the big 4 or 5 that you always hear about kind of done within a 2-month window. So really tested our relationship and brought us closer together. And then probably about 1.5 years or so into San Diego, we were blessed to start our family. And like you said, I have 3 little girls, 9, 6, and 4. And it's been great. So when the opportunity for Tampa presented itself, it was a little bit, I'll be honest, it was probably not a little bit, it was a lot out of our comfort zone. We were very happy in San Diego. I was working for an amazing ownership group there with great people, many of which are still there. I have just a ton of respect for. One of my mentors, Eric Bruckner, is the president there now. At the time, he was our head legal counsel, good friend. And then, some people that have moved on around the country as well. But we weren't looking for that opportunity, I think, is what you hope for with any great opportunity when something comes out of the blue and you don't feel like you're forced or having to make that decision. But I think the 2 things that really attracted us about Tampa, number one, I'll go back to what I said earlier, the people. When I came here and had an opportunity over the course of really a couple months to come out here twice and spend time with Jeff Vinik, the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning and Vinik Sports Group, Steve Griggs, our CEO, who was responsible for recruiting me, he was the president at the time, hired me. I've reported to him from day one that I've been here 5 years now. And also at the time, some of the young men and women on my staff that I had a chance to interact with and get to know, people that I were, in essence, was going to be, inheriting. I just felt really good about the group of people that were here from a leadership standpoint, ownership standpoint. Felt very, very strong that this was at the time kind of, the wave was just about to get going. And so I joined what would have been roughly all-star break of that year. And, it's been 5 years now. We expanded probably about 2 years into being here. Tampa Bay Sports and Entertainment kind of was always the parent company, if you will, but everybody talked about the Lightning, knew the Lightning and Amalie Arena. And as our business started growing, we started looking at ways under Steve's leadership of how do we get more, how do we get more opportunity across different business verticals? How do we create more opportunities for ourselves so that we're not just reliant on, the arena and the hockey team? And over time, that's morphed into now what is Vinik Sports Group that we launched in February, if I'm not mistaken. We rebranded the organization and had an opportunity to do that in a big way, which was a lot of fun. But we've taken on a number of opportunities. So obviously, Tampa Bay Lightning and Amalie Arena are kind of the main 2 and always will be. But we also have layered in some really great partnerships with the University of South Florida. Here in Tampa, go Bulls. We love the Bulls. We represent them from a multimedia rights sponsorship standpoint for the athletic department. And then we also, under Vinik Sports Group Live, we also do all the managing and booking of the arena on campus, the Yuengling Center. And our team had a chance to work through the naming rights of that a few years ago. The gentleman that books that arena is also the same gentleman that books Amalie Arena. I think we've gone from 4 shows there at Yuengling Center to roughly 20 to 25 a year now. So we've really grown that property across the event side as well, not just the athletic sponsorship opportunities. 2 years ago, we launched the Identity Tampa Bay, which is a digital network that's really focused on leaning in on what are all the great things about living in the greater Tampa Bay area. It's a really great opportunity for us to create new content, unique content, but also work with many influencers around the Tampa Bay area. And you think of the celebrity chef that's got a couple 100,000 social media followers, to the really cool, CrossFit or yoga instructor or whoever that is. We essentially partner with those people. They create the content. We aggregate a lot of the content. We also have a production team that makes our own content, and then we go ahead and distribute that. And then my team specifically gets to sell against that and bring in all the corporate partnerships on that side. And then the last piece would be Tampa Bay Sports, our retail division. So we took, under Steve's leadership about 4 years ago, we took a venture into going across the entire region representing licensed merchandise. So through Tampa Bay Sports, online or at our 3 retail stores, you can buy Tampa Bay Rays gear, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Rowdies Soccer Club, obviously the Lightning, USF. And so we carry very much a regional sports play there. So those are kind of the different platforms, different franchises, if you will, that are kind of underneath what is now Vinik Sports Group. Mm-hmm. And it's really rolled up into 3. You have VSG Live, which represents all of those opportunities with music and content and things of that nature. You have VSG Commercial Sales, which my group and I oversee, which is all those opportunities like a USF or other opportunities to represent and acquire multimedia rights. And then thirdly, Facility Management under VSG Facilities. Mm-hmm. And so there's 3 other venues in the market that we help out with different sorts of facility, back of house security, et cetera. Those are kind of our 3 core competencies, if you will.
Well, if anybody ever wants to know what Vinik Sports Group is, they should probably watch this video. You just laid it out and they can do their research all in one place.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of fun. It's been a huge undertaking for us.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys have been leaning in and growing. Was the plan to continue to kind of use these pieces as growth for the future of Vinik Sports Group as you guys expanded the business?
Yeah, I think, as we look at kind of the strategic goals behind it, one, it goes back to thinking about, before we were a singular stock, maybe with the Lightning, and wanting to be more of a mutual fund, right? And be more diversified and have other revenue streams as a company that we can grow over time. Mm-hmm. To continue to make sure we're as healthy as possible. The second part, from a leadership and talent development / recruiting standpoint, to have all these different properties that we represent, to have that opportunity to recruit people in to work on those, to grow them between properties, to move people around. I mean, we've had, probably no less than a dozen folks already be promoted and moved kind of within the company to work on these various projects, because we very much want to use that as an opportunity to grow and develop people from within. That's a personal passion point for me. So those have been kind of the core 2 reasons why we've taken these initiatives on.
Well, so it's a lot of stuff going on. You also have an interesting title. Not everybody has a title. There might be a CMO or a CRO, Chief Marketing Revenue Officer, like the evolution of what you were hired to do and what you're doing now. What are you spending your time on?
That's a great question. So originally when I came in, I was overseeing kind of ticket sales, retail, marketing, and then our analytics and strategy groups. And prior, in my past, as you had mentioned, in San Diego, I had overseen corporate partnerships for a few years. So I kind of had that skill set and experience. So I think as we started to grow, we had an opportunity, and a good friend of mine, Bill Abercrombie, who's another executive on our team, was tasked with really launching some of these new initiatives under Vinik Sports Group, specifically with USF. And so as he went to run that business and start those teams from scratch, I was asked to kind of help pick up some of the other revenue lines for Amalie Arena and the Lightning, being corporate partnerships, and suites and premium seating. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how that came about, and why the combination of the 2. We're continuing to evolve. We just hired a new EVP, Aaron McVary, who's an amazing content and marketing mind, brings a very different, unique skill set to us that we didn't have. So I'll be sharing responsibilities with her moving forward over much of our marketing. And I'll be specifically over a lot of our digital that we work through, digital, social media, our web and our app and those type of things. And then her team is doing a phenomenal job creating new content, especially during the last couple of months where we've really had to lean in on content more than ever before, not being able to connect with our fans as often, right? So brand and content. So we're always, regardless of titles and those type of things, we're always trying to get better on how can we continue to grow and elevate our team. So it's been interesting. I would say I spend the majority of my time right now between a couple of groups. Corporate partnerships is obviously a really important one, working directly with our group. Luckily for me, I have a group of amazing leaders on that team, and Mike Harrison and Sherry Anderson and Josh Corlin that run that day to day. So I get to help out as needed, but they're the ones that are really, in the weeds doing a lot of the deals. I get to work and help and work with our ticket sales team quite a bit, with our vice president of ticketing, Travis Pellymounter. Suites, analytics, strategy, all those groups I kind of spend time with as needed. So it kind of just depends on where the business is and how we go about breaking up that time allocation.
Well, I'm fascinated with the storytelling about careers, and you hit this a little bit earlier, 10 years or so in ticket sales. And then at the Padres, you pivoted, you go from VP of ticket sales to VP of corporate partnerships. What, for someone who, this is an interesting move, and a lot of people talk about, how can I break through? How can I move into another part of the business? How did that happen for you? What were the challenges and going into a leadership role as well? What were the challenges of making the move from a kind of a career in ticket sales at that point to now moving over to partnerships?
Well, listen, the first thing that has to happen is you have to have someone give you that opportunity, right? And you have to have someone that believes in you. I was fortunate that I did. Tom Garfinkel, CEO of the Padres at the time, allowed a few of us to do that. We had a situation where a good friend and mentor of ours, Brent Stellick, was leaving to go to the Cleveland Browns, and he had kind of been over various groups. And with Brent's departure, that allowed Tom to really restructure. And there was three of us, amazing leaders in their own right. Tyler Epp, who's at the Kansas City Chiefs, and Jeremy Walls at the Dolphins. The three of us really had an opportunity to grow. And Tom came to us and said, listen, I'm going to move you guys around. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to give you new responsibilities. And for me, when we sat down, I had worked closely with corporate partnerships at that point for the better part of probably, 7 years plus kind of in the industry between the Raiders and the Padres. But that's very different than being in the weeds doing the deals every day.
Right.
And the conversation I had with Tom, I'll never forget, sitting down over lunch, he said, when I was working in, I think he was in marketing at NASCAR or at a team, I think it was at a specific team, his boss said, listen, there's folks that can write checks, or there's people that go get checks. And, kind of use that as a lure for him to go to the sales side. And at that point, I had been probably better half of 10 years in ticketing and premium seating and suites. And Tom's point to me was, Jarrod, if you're going to want to grow and maybe have the opportunity to be in my seat someday, you need to get wider. You need to learn more about the business. And corporate partnerships, obviously a very important part of the business. And there's no better way to do that than just going and doing that. But you don't see that. You don't see that very often. You don't see people, especially at that level. I was already a VP, being able to jump over and do that. Yeah. I was fortunate to have Tom as a CEO that believed in me that I could do that. I had a great leader in Tyler Epp. That was a very established senior leader in partnerships that I was going to be reporting into. And then I had a gentleman who was actually a dear friend of mine, Joe Mulford. We had worked together at the Giants. He was our director of sales and partnerships. So I was protected because I had Tyler and Joe. They wedged me in the middle, which allowed me and gave me the air cover to make mistakes, to learn the job from the ground up. And I always joke with folks to this day, I was probably the most overpaid, overtitled as a vice president activation, rep that you could have. I spent that whole first year just in the weeds with my activation team, just learning every deal that we had, why we had it, what were the KPIs, what were the partners looking for, talking about the measurement tools and all those things, and really learned it from the ground up before I even had to worry about going out and trying to strike, new deals.
Yeah.
So I think the learning curve was a lot of what I just said. You know, until you get in there and you are studying the deals and what are the objectives of the client, the partner, how are you going to measure them? What are the KPIs you're going to put into place to actually measure them? And then what are the measurement tools that you're going to use to do that? You know, those are the things I thought maybe I knew a little bit about partnerships, but until you get into the weeds, you realize you don't really know that much at all. So I spent the better part of a couple years, obviously learning that. It's an ongoing process, and you're learning every single day. I've learned a ton here in Tampa working closely with my partnership team. So to me, it's one of the most fun parts of our business because there is so much involved in being a true marketer and working in partnerships.
Was that hard for you from like the pace and the cadence of deals and partnerships coming out of tickets and premium and suites? Was that a challenge for you, or did you enjoy the different kind of pace that goes along with that work?
Yeah, I think when you're in ticketing specifically, it can, even if you don't want to be, it can become transactional just because of the volume and how much easier it is for people to make decisions on, you know, thousands of dollars deals, not $1 million deals. So I think at that point in my time, my mindset was right, that I was thinking more long-term because I had been in more of the strategy side of ticketing and suites as a senior leader, not a seller, for several years at that point. So always thinking about the long game. You know, we're going to establish a business plan and a process and a strategy that's going to get us from zero to whatever our revenue goal is. That's not going to happen overnight. And so I think I was enough removed from that kind of day-to-day transactional mindset, thinking long-term and thinking strategically, that lent itself very well to that changeover and move into partnerships. Because that's really, for me, what partnerships is. Every single deal is so unique. And you have to, obviously, as I mentioned, go through establishing what the objectives are with the client. And they're very different for every brand. And then establishing what those kind of, you know, those KPIs are going to be, and then how are we going to measure those together? What will success look like a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road from now? Very different conversations than obviously you might have in ticketing. Maybe a little more middle of the road of what you look like with suites and some premium seating when you're talking about longer term contracts and longer or larger amounts of money being spent. But I think it was the right time. It was the right challenge. It was the right leadership. And it was the right people that I was around. And there was a little bit for me, listen, I don't know that I would have sought that change out myself. You know, and if I didn't, I don't know where I'd be sitting right now or what I'd be doing. But when I listened to Tom over the course of one lunch talk about that, it just, a light bulb clicked. You know, I just said, yes, if I want to do this long term and I want to be in this business for 40 years, not 10 years like I was at the time or whatever it was, I do need to become a broader leader. I need to learn other parts of the business. And it's funny because that's what ended up bringing me here. You know, when I first came to Tampa, I was not overseeing partnerships and suites, two areas I had been from, you know, but I had the opportunity to oversee retail for the first time, oversee marketing day to day, all aspects of marketing, digital, social, all those things, creative, branding, advertising. Those were all areas of the business I had not overseen day to day until I came here. So you go back and you start telling that story, like that's how you grow your career. That's how you learn and grow as an individual.
Yeah, those are great points. And the drumbeat of people that we keep hearing from you, we'll probably continue to hear from you in terms of going to work for the right people. NFL, well, MLB, NFL, back to MLB, now NHL, plus a bunch of other stuff as well. What, for the uninitiated, for you, you know, how do you feel about the differences between the leagues when you're working in this space and you've seen so much different, the way the leagues are run, the way they're giving support to teams in different ways? What for you has stood out as like the biggest differences of working in all these different sports?
That's a great question. I get that question a lot, especially from college students and people that are looking to break into sports when they see that I've worked across kind of three of the big four, if you will. You know, what's the most similar, what's very different? And for me, a lot of the foundation of sales and marketing is the same, you know, and the products may change, the leagues may change. You know, there are obviously nuances, right? But at the end of the day, the fundamentals of sales and marketing, I believe in those philosophies are the same, and how we approach those. The leagues are obviously very different. How the leagues are structured, how, you know, what makes up a profitable franchise versus a not. Like there's a lot of things that maybe, you know, are out of more your day-to-day control. But when I look at those, and I look at sales and marketing and how we're going to go out and try to represent our properties, quite frankly, they're very similar across the board. And now even at Vinik Sports Group, as we look at our representation with the University of South Florida, and we look at our digital network, and there's a lot of things that we will use across all of those properties or all those franchises. So it's not as stark, I think, as maybe if I had come from non-sports into it. And I've talked to a lot of friends that have done that, and I think it's a little more shocking, and there's differences. But for me, it's been, if you can identify, and I boil it down, Jeff, and it's probably too easy, but I always go into looking at any one of our teams or our business plans as people plus process equal results. I've talked about that for a long time in my career. That sounds so simple, but that's the point. Like, if you can get your process built the right way, and if you can add really good people to that, the results will come. And that's one thing, our business is really hard. We're judged on results, right? And hitting bottom line numbers, especially when you're on the revenue side, But I'm a firm believer that if you just focus and worry about results, that's going to slip. And if you don't have the right people, doesn't matter how good your process is. If you have great people, but your process is broken, results aren't going to be what they could be. So we try to spend a lot of time on process and people. And if we can get those right, I think we're going to be successful. We'll have the results.
Yeah. I'm not suggesting that you're considering something else right now. I know you've been contacted in past about NBA jobs. So you've got the big three, and MLS could be considered, big five. But
yeah, absolutely.
Does NBA, do you ever think of it in those terms? Like, hey, I'd like to work in NBA, just based also with Team Bo and, the strength of their leadership there.
I have a lot of respect, the utmost respect for the NBA and Team Bo in particular. I think what they've done as a group over the years has revolutionized sports business and what we do. And a lot of the leagues, we take a lot of those key findings and learnings from them, and we go out and recruit people that have worked in the NBA and those type of things. So, for me, I think honestly they're going to have to throw me out of here before I would ever consider leaving. Love it here. My family loves it in Tampa. I love our organization. I work for the best owner in sports. I work for an incredible CEO, and I have an incredibly talented group of people around me. So I think we'll be just fine here, hopefully, for a long, long time. As you look at the leagues, though, I would say overall, you have to have a lot of respect for the NBA. And I know a lot of the people there, incredible leaders at Team Bo. I could rattle off 15 names, but even at the team level, I spend a lot of time talking to my counterparts, even at NBA teams as well, just because I really respect the process and what they go through and the learnings and the sharing, the open sharing that they have. And I'll give the NHL some credit too. They've started to establish some of those tactics as well. I think we're doing the most sharing across the league that I've seen in the 5 years. Our CMO of the league, Heidi Browning, and everybody involved in the league, Keith Wattell on the revenue side, they do a great job sharing a lot of data across the teams. So, the only way you can't get access to data is if you aren't paying attention or you just don't care. But I think now at this day and age, a lot of leagues have caught up and seen that what the NBA has done and what Team Bo has done for years works. We're big fans of theirs.
So if you look at the tenures, you have 3.5 to 5.5 years in all these organizations you work for, which is really good tenure, especially, at how you were coming up through the business. How have you decided, what's the process for you been? Has it been different every time when you talk about making a move? Mm-hmm. Again, when looking here in the past, what were the divining rods you used? Were there any things that you can share that really helped you determine when you were ready to make a move?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple that I can point to right away, and not to be repetitive for our listeners, but I just think it's so important who you're working for. And kind of my North Star, my guiding light through all this has been trying to work for really good people, people that are going to invest in me professionally and personally to be successful. People, also going to a place where you think you have an opportunity to really make a change, to make a difference, to move the needle. And so, I've had other opportunities that I haven't gone. And I think when I had to weigh it out, it came down to a couple of those factors there. And was it necessarily a better situation that I was going to than what I was already in? I vividly remember multiple examples of where I maybe stayed somewhere, longer than, maybe another opportunity came up, but it was because I believed in who I was working for. I believed in what we were doing, and I knew I was still learning and growing. And listen, like, it happens all the time. We see people, get an opportunity to go do something, it doesn't work out, right? For whatever reason. And that's always something that sits in the back of my head, is like, wanting to make sure I've overturned every rock, made sure I've evaluated everything, that if and when I go take an opportunity like that, it's for the right reasons. And it's not for title or compensation or geography. And those decisions get harder and harder to make. Yeah. And you're not always going to get them right necessarily. And it's also really hard to identify that maybe through a recruiting process. The culture of a company, the people, when you've only met them a few times, but you have to do your homework. You have to talk to people, at the league. You have to talk to people, that used to work there. You have to really get a sense of, what am I getting myself into?
So that's really good stuff. I was talking to someone today just about culture now, trying to define culture through Zoom interviews, when he's probably going to get hired into a position without ever having a chance to go on site to an organization.
Yeah.
Have you guys had to do that? Have you had to hire anybody without seeing them in person yet?
We haven't. Now, I will say, pre-COVID, as part of our interviewing process, we would always do Skype interviews and Zoom interviews, things like that, before we got to the point of bringing a candidate in. Mm-hmm. So, to help whittle it down when you're dealing with a lot of folks vying for a position. So I think our managers have learned to use it even prior to this a certain way. But even for us, nothing would replace that face-to-face, getting to spend a day with people and interacting with them.
Yeah.
So, as we go forward, and we haven't had the opportunity, we haven't had the need to hire folks over the last couple months, so that hasn't been there. But we're learning a lot about ourselves. We're learning a lot about our process. And I've heard of a few people I know as well taking opportunities, and they haven't been able to meet in person. It's been through Zoom calls. So, one thing I have learned is that we can do our jobs really effectively from home, more effectively than I would have ever thought. Outside of the obvious of an event, a game or a concert, and wanting to see your clients in person, pretty much everything else we've been able to keep doing the way we were doing pre-COVID. And, I don't think anything will ever replace that human touch. I'm certainly a huge fan of that human touch, of people interacting together, especially in sales, and seeing your clients face to face and being able to go have that wow moment, impress their client or their family or whatever that is. Nothing replaces that to me. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that we're going to get into this, completely AI world of sales happening without that, but we're going to be challenged going forward as an industry. So how do we learn from that? How do we come out of this better? How do we adjust to kind of quote unquote the new norm? And what you referenced is just one great example of that.
Well, there's a whole nother conversation, I think, that I'm going to develop a podcast about the culture piece, I think, just because that we're going to know in 6 and 12 months of these hires that are being made exclusively on Zoom, how they turned out. The results will prove themselves out, but there's a lot of inherent challenges, which again, I'll kind of sidebar on that for a later time. You talked about, the learning that you've done. There's so many things that I think about as a leader. You're a leader for your organization. How have you kept not only your edge, but the edge of your people? Now that you're working remotely, how have you kept your edge, and how have you kept your people's edge in this remote environment?
Yeah, it's been difficult. I would tell you the first month or so of the kind of work from home, we, you took what you were doing in the office and you tried to just do it at home as best you could. And part of that was, instead of having meetings, you were scheduling Zoom calls. And we just found ourselves being burnt out, at the end of the day, just being literally drained and going, what just happened? I just spent 7 hours on a Zoom call, or Zoom calls throughout the day. And, I think my leadership team and I took a step back, and I'll never forget this. It was a Friday, and it was probably just after the first month. And, we were having a virtual happy hour like everybody else does it, right? And we were just sitting back and talking about the week in retrospect. And I just kind of blurted it out. And I just said, hey, guys, like, I don't know how you guys feel. I'm exhausted right now. This was on a Friday afternoon about 5:30. I was like, I can't keep this pace up. How do you guys feel? And to each one of them, no one wanted to admit that, to say that, but we all trust each other enough. When you talk about culture, trust is paramount, right? And we all trusted each other enough to say, yeah, you know what, I'm struggling. Here's how, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm stuck on these calls. I'm sitting on my laptop all day, and I hear my kids in the other room with my spouse, educating them. And I feel even more, less present than I was before, and all these things started adding up. So I kind of, over the course of that weekend, I kind of had my Jerry Maguire, it's not a manifesto, it's a memo moment. And I just sat down and I wrote, and I changed it probably 10 times. And I sent out a note to all my staff. I have about 85 people on my staff across our different groups, going into kind of our call, usually Monday or Tuesday morning for the week. And I just, it was basically a call out on, what do you want your Corona story to be? That's kind of what we called it. It was, when we get through this, because we will, and you look back at this moment of time, whether it's 2 months, 5 months, a year, whatever it is, like, what do you want it to be, right? Is it, oh, we made some really great business plans and we spent hours upon hours on Zoom calls? Or are there other things? Or, what am I doing to become a better, husband or father in my case? What am I doing better to, to enhance, my faith, to enhance my relationships with other people in the company that maybe haven't been as strong before? What am I doing from a professional development standpoint, whether it's developing a new skill, reading different books, listening to podcasts, all these things you've been putting off but saying you're wanting to do. So we kind of outlined this, this memo of 4 or 5 kind of key things that we said, all of our leaders, kind of our 20 managers, we said, we're going to commit to this as a group, and we're going to really every week drive this home with our staff. And we're going to make sure every one of our staff members are doing these things throughout the week. And that could be as simple as making time to go walk with your significant other, or go play with your kids, or go get a workout, whatever that is. And we kind of mapped it out. And I think it really gave us kind of, again, that North Star to shoot for as we went forward. And now fast forward a couple months later, I think we've done a really good job of doing that. And now we're getting some positive momentum with the NHL return to play, us announcing as a league coming back, our workouts starting back up in small groups for players, even very limited access to the office for employees, doing some volunteer work in the community. Mm-hmm. I think we've been able to hone in on that and keep that really focused for us. And then you look at what's gone on around our country over the last, month, let's call it, with social injustice and racism and those conversations that are taking place. That has even given us more of an opportunity as a group to be invested in each other, to talk about our culture, to talk about who we want to be as an organization, who I want to be as an individual, and how do we get there. And I believe all things happen for a reason. And I know that, our country, but also our industry, and in this case, my staff, we're going to come out of this better because of everything we're going through right now.
Well, that's powerful stuff from someone, to be that, to some degree vulnerable, but emotionally intelligent enough to know that your staff's going to respond well to it. There's a lot of trust with that honesty that you shared with them. And that, that probably, because it's you, they probably weren't surprised, but they were probably taken a little bit aback. They're like, wow, this is a real conversation. We can really talk about the challenges that we're having here as human beings.
Yeah. So. And it's our leaders deserve a lot of credit. They have done an amazing job, because it is hard. It's hard. If I have that many people on my staff, it's hard to connect at that level with every one employee. We know each other by name, right? All those things, but to be able to have that conversation, let's say, about what we were just talking about, what's going on right now and how we're addressing it as a company, those aren't easy conversations. A young man that's a mentee of mine, he phrased it best. He said, Jarrod, we got to be comfortable having uncomfortable conversations right now, and so as leaders, we need to be the ones helping facilitate those conversations, and listen, there's a lot of thought and caring that goes into how to articulate and do that the right way. But again, I go back to this, it gives us an opportunity as a team to become closer. It gives us an opportunity as an organization to become closer and make more of an impact in our community. And those are some of the best things about what we do, and working in this industry. We get to have that effect.
Well, I mean, I love your point about, what's your COVID story? What do you want your COVID story to be? That's such great advice from a leader to their people, and I think it's, frankly, that's advice. I've given similar advice to people that were out there, looking for a job or not sure what to do. And that whole, be ready to talk about, what did you do during this global health crisis? Were you at home in the fetal position watching Netflix, which, I can see some value in that to some people that are having a hard time with it. After you come out of that stage, though, you have to be able to talk about what were you doing, from a pandemic perspective, how were you improving yourself? What were you learning? What were you doing? There has to be a good story there. And I think that, you just challenged your people to be able to articulate that, which is great.
Well, we just had to do it. I worry so much about, I'm home and I have a wife and 3 kids. So I naturally have built-in distraction all day long. How much I choose to interact or not, just depends on the course of the day. But, we were very concerned as a group about, especially with our younger staff that are single, maybe that are home, that aren't from here. They have no family. They relocated here to work for us. Now they're stuck in their house for 3 months. And, mental health, just their spiritual well-being, their physical well-being, there's a lot there. And I think the timing for us was really good. And, that's going to be the challenge as we go forward, because none of us knows if and when, in fact, we'll get back to being in office together, and it's not going to be what it was before. We do know that. We're not just walking back in there, at some point and going back to 200 full-time employees walking around with no mask like we were 4 months ago. So we're going to have to find ways to continue to connect with people and to continue to work through professional and personal development. I mean, it's, to me, don't go work somewhere ever unless you have a commitment from a leader that is going to do that, is going to have a personal professional development plan with you, right? Because that is, to me, that is one of the most important things we can do. If we can get someone prepared to take that next opportunity, and even if it's not with us, we've done our job, right? We should not be in the business of trying to hoard talent. And do I want to promote people from within and grow them? Absolutely. Look at our track record. We've done it. That's one of the things I'm most proud of, is when I get old and retire one day, it's like that Bill Walsh coaching tree, right? Or that Bill Belichick coaching tree. Look at all these amazing leaders that I could rattle off right and left, 15 of them that I've hired or worked with that are now VPs or higher in this industry. That's a source of pride. Well, if you're not pouring into your people, if you're not helping them discover that about themselves, get better as people, as professionals, you're not going to keep them very long. And the longer you're doing that, the better they are producing for your organization, and they're grooming the next generation behind them. So it makes sense to pour into them and to do that, and to spend the time and the money and the resources to be able to do that. That's personally my philosophy, and that's one of the reasons why I came here. It's a philosophy of our organizations as well.
Well, I could talk to you all day. You talked about having hours and hours of Zoom calls, so I'll be sensitive to your time and just tell you how much I appreciate you talking with me today, your friendship, and just the leadership that you shared with us today. It was really, really valuable.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, and always good to catch up with you. I miss you, my friend.
You as well, my friend. You take care of that family.